Agatha Raisin and Toni's Dangerous Reply. Dear listeners, welcome to tonight's mystery. I'm Jane, your host, and I'm thrilled to have you here for another captivating tale. Where are you listening from tonight? Drop your answer in the comments. I always enjoy learning more about our wonderful community. And do not forget to like and subscribe. It will motivate me for more mysteries every day. Now, let's get cozy and begin tonight's story. Chapter 1. The Message at Dawn. Agatha Raisin had promised herself a quiet morning, the kind she rarely allowed. Carsley was bathed in a soft, pearly dawn light, and for once her cottage felt like a sanctuary rather than a headquarters of chaos. She stepped onto the patio with her cup of strong tea, inhaling the crisp air that carried the distant scent of damp earth and early roses. The village was unusually still, as though the world had momentarily decided to give her a break. She settled into her wicker chair, stretching her legs and closing her eyes. Peace, she thought, with a satisfied sigh. Pure, unadulterated peace. She wouldn't let anyone disturb it. Not this time. But the universe, as usual, disagreed. Her phone buzzed on the table beside her. Once, twice, then again with an urgency that felt out of place in the gentle Carsley morning. Agatha cracked one eye open. No, absolutely not. Whoever it was could wait. She'd earned this moment of calm after the exhausting week she'd endured. She took another sip of tea. The phone buzzed again, long, insistent, as though demanding she acknowledge it. "Oh, for heaven's sake," she muttered, snatching the phone. "This had better be good." The screen displayed Toni's name. Agatha's annoyance evaporated. Toni wasn't one to send frantic messages unless something was genuinely wrong. But there they were, 5 messages, all sent within minutes of each other, time-stamped at an hour when no one in their right mind should be awake. Agatha tapped the first one open. "Agatha, are you up? I need—" The next. "Something strange here. I think I—" Another. "Wait, hold on. Someone's—" Agatha's heart thudded. The final message read, "Agatha, don't reply yet. Someone—" And then nothing. No follow-up. Not even a hasty typo-filled attempt to finish the sentence. Just silence. Agatha stood abruptly, tea sloshing against the rim of her mug. The peaceful morning she had guarded so fiercely shattered instantly, replaced by a sharp, cold ripple of alarm. "Toni, what have you walked into?" she whispered. She reread the messages, hoping she had misunderstood, but the unease only deepened. Toni's words were clipped, rushed, written by someone who didn't have time to think, let alone type. Someone startled, someone possibly hiding, someone not safe. Agatha paced across the patio, mind already racing. Toni was capable, clever, and sharper than most people twice her age, but she was also young, impulsive, too brave for her own good. And whatever had happened to her, it had happened quickly. She considered calling. No. Toni had said don't reply. Why? What danger had she sensed? And who was this someone she hadn't gotten the chance to name? Agatha's instincts roared to life, drowning out the morning birdsong. She tried to reason through possibilities, sleepwalking messages, a prank, a misinterpretation, but none fit. Toni wasn't careless. She wouldn't frighten Agatha without cause. Agatha moved inside, pacing across the kitchen tiles as the kettle clicked in the background. Should she drive to Toni's flat? Phone Mrs. Bloxby? Alert Bill? She hated relying on the police unless absolutely necessary, but this felt like the kind of situation that could go very wrong very fast. She grabbed her keys and shoved them into her coat pocket. She didn't know what she would find, or whether Toni needed rescuing, reassurance, or reprimanding, but standing still was not an option. Her peaceful morning had been replaced with a question that refused to be ignored, and Agatha Raisin intended to find out. She felt the weight of the silence around her, as if the village itself was waiting for her next move, urging her to step forward before the trail faded away entirely into uncertainty. Agatha's fingers trembled slightly as she tried Toni's number again. The call didn't even ring this time. It leapt straight to voicemail with the same clipped recording she'd heard far too many times in the last few minutes. She hung up quickly and dialed again, as if repetition alone might force the universe to pick up. But the result was identical. Straight to voicemail, straight into silence. She exhaled sharply and moved to the living room window, scanning the quiet lane outside her cottage as though an answer might appear there. Carsley was waking slowly, unaware that something felt wrong in the air, wrong in her chest. She scrolled through Toni's previous messages, hoping she'd missed something, some hint that could point her in the right direction. One small notification blinked beneath the last message, a location tag, just a tiny pin, dropped without comment. Merster. Agatha frowned. Toni had no reason to be near that part of Merster, especially not at the strange hour the messages were sent. She enlarged the map. The pin hovered over a nondescript office building she recognized immediately. She'd taken a client there months ago. A tedious dispute over advertising claims. Nothing dangerous, nothing memorable. Yet Toni had been there in the middle of the night. Agatha's gut tightened. That building should have been dark and locked, so what was she doing there? She tried calling again. Voicemail. She typed a quick message, "Call me the moment you see this," and hit send, even though she doubted it would go through. She checked the timestamp on the location ping. Hours old. Too old, but better than nothing. She grabbed her landline phone and rang a contact in Merster, a chatty assistant who usually knew everything happening in that district. The woman answered in her usual breezy tone, but the moment Agatha mentioned the building, her voice dipped. "Odd noises earlier," she whispered, "like metal scraping, and the lights flickered around 3, but I didn't see anyone go in." She refused to say more, claiming her supervisor needed her urgently. Agatha dialed another acquaintance, hoping for clarity, but received only vague murmurs about a car idling outside the building last night and someone hurrying toward the alley behind it. No names, no details, just fragments. Unhelpful, unsettling fragments. She rubbed her forehead, annoyance and worry tangling together. Agatha wouldn't wander into an office building at night without a reason. She wouldn't ignore this many calls. She wouldn't leave Agatha in the dark without explanation. Unless she couldn't. Agatha grabbed her coat again, this time with firm decision. She locked the cottage door, slid into her car, and started the engine with a forceful twist of her wrist. The countryside rolled past in a blur as she drove toward Merster, her mind reconstructing every possible scenario, from mundane mishap to something far worse. She tried calling one last time at a red light, but the call dove instantly to voicemail again, its cold certainty tightening her grip on the steering wheel. Merster's familiar streets felt different when she arrived, dimmer, subdued, as if the city itself sensed something was amiss. She navigated toward the district where the building stood, her pulse quickening with each turn. When she finally pulled up along the curb, she killed the engine and stared out through the windshield. The office building loomed above her, tall, yet strangely lifeless. Its windows reflected only the dull morning light, and no movement stirred within. Even the air felt unnaturally still, as though the entire place were holding its breath. Agatha stepped out of the car, the quiet pressing in around her. Whatever had happened here, it was waiting for her to uncover it. She steadied herself, knowing answers waited inside, only if she dared to enter.
Chapter 2. The Building That Shouldn't Be Empty. The moment Agatha stepped inside the building, a chill crept up her arms. The air was wrong, too still, too heavy, as though the walls themselves were holding secrets they didn't wish to share. Her footsteps echoed faintly across the tiled lobby, each one swallowed by the hush pressing in from every direction. She paused, letting her eyes adjust to the dim interior. A stack of papers lay scattered near the reception desk, edges fluttering ever so slightly in a draft she couldn't feel. "Not good," she murmured. She moved closer, crouching to examine the mess. The papers were ordinary office forms, but the way they sprawled across the floor looked neither accidental nor routine. Someone had rushed. Someone had struggled. She straightened and caught sight of a chair toppled halfway across the hall. It wasn't merely crooked or bumped. It looked shoved, its legs splayed awkwardly as though pushed aside in haste. A faint scent drifted through the air, stopping her breath for a moment. Perfume. Not sharp or floral, but soft, expensive, and lingering unnaturally in the stale atmosphere. It didn't belong here, not in a place that smelled usually of dust and disinfectant. She recognized the scent vaguely. Toni had tried something similar a few weeks ago, a subtle blend she'd described as quiet confidence, but this version had a sharper edge, almost metallic beneath the sweetness. Agatha's pulse quickened. She reminded herself not to jump to conclusions, but the tight pull in her stomach refused to loosen. She forced herself to take calm, measured steps deeper into the building. The main corridor stretched ahead, dimly lit by flickering ceiling lights that hummed faintly. She passed open office doors, each one a quiet tableau of disorder. Drawers partially open, pens scattered, a mug resting on its side with cold tea pooled beneath it. "Stay focused," she whispered under her breath. Halfway down the corridor, something caught her eye. A small notebook lay in the center of the floor, its pages bent, its cover smudged as though scraped against something rough. She reached for it and froze. It was Toni's. Agatha recognized the little doodled star in the corner of the cover. Toni had drawn it absent-mindedly during a long afternoon stakeout last month. Agatha lifted the notebook with careful hands. Several pages had been torn out, the ragged edges unmistakable. She flipped through the remaining ones, but the scrawled notes were too cryptic to make sense of on the spot. One phrase stood out, circled twice. "He isn't who he says he is." Agatha's heartbeat thudded loudly in the silence. Before she could examine more, a movement flickered in the edge of her vision. A shadow, long, swift, passing just beyond the far end of the hallway. Agatha snapped her head up, eyes narrowed, but the corridor was empty again. No footsteps, no lingering shape, only the faint sway of a half-open door that hadn't been moving before. Someone was here. She tightened her grip on the notebook. Every instinct she possessed screamed for her to be cautious. She stepped lightly, avoiding loose papers that could betray her with a rustle. The silence of the building shifted, no longer passive, but watchful. She stopped beside the open door where the shadow had passed. Inside, the office was dim except for a sliver of light leaking through the blinds. She pressed herself to the wall, peering in. Nothing moved. No one breathed, but the chair behind the desk rocked faintly, as if someone had just risen from it. A prickle crawled up her spine. She scanned the room again, slower this time. No Toni, no clear answers, just deeper questions and a sense of being observed. She stepped back into the hallway and inhaled quietly, trying to steady her nerves. The building shouldn't have been empty. And it definitely wasn't. She slipped the notebook into her coat pocket and moved forward, each step deliberate, each breath shallow, knowing that every sound she made could be the one that revealed her presence to whoever or whatever still lingered in the shadows.
Agatha stepped out into the cool mid-morning air, drawing in a steadying breath as the building's heavy door clicked shut behind her. The silence outside felt unnervingly similar to the one inside, too still, too watchful, the kind of quiet that suggested someone had recently fled the scene rather than peacefully locked up for the night. She scanned the narrow lane, half expecting a figure to dart behind a passing car or an alleyway. Nothing moved. Even the pigeons on the telephone wire stared down at her as if waiting for her next move. She was just about to return to her car when a door across the street creaked open. A thin man in a wool vest stepped out of the small stationery shop, a broom in hand. He froze the moment he noticed her. His eyes flicked to the building behind her.
then quickly away as if he'd been caught lurking somewhere he shouldn't have been. Agatha wasted no time. She crossed the road with the determined stride that had made half of Carsley rethink lying to her ever again. "You there!" she called, softening her voice slightly as she approached. "Good morning. I wonder if you might help me." The man swallowed hard. "Help? Me?" He gripped the broom like it was a shield. I don't know anything." "You don't know what I'm asking yet," Agatha said, folding her arms. "But you do look like a man who notices things. Shopkeepers usually do." He blinked, his nervous gaze sliding again toward the office building. "Oh, I don't pay attention. Too much work, too many forms to file. Hardly see anything at all." Agatha smiled, the kind of smile she used when coaxing gossip from stubborn villagers. "I'm looking for a young woman, a friend of mine who was here last night. Something may have happened inside that building. Anything you remember could help." "I shouldn't get involved," he murmured, already taking a step back toward his door. Agatha's tone softened, but her eyes stayed sharp. "I'm not asking for trouble, just truth." The man hesitated. His fingers drummed anxiously against the broom handle. "There were noises," he finally said, voice dropping to a whisper. "Banging. Late, very late." Agatha leaned in slightly. "What kind of banging?" "Like furniture being moved or knocked over." His Adam's apple bobbed. "Then I heard shouting. Could you hear what they said?" He shook his head. "Not clearly. But I heard a name, a woman's name." His eyes darted upward, meeting hers with fleeting alarm. It sounded like Toni. A cold prickle ran down Agatha's spine. "Are you sure?" "Pretty sure." His gaze slid left and right, as if he was checking for eavesdroppers. "A few minutes later, there was a car, dark one. I didn't see the make. It started up fast, too fast for this street. Then, everything was quiet." Agatha absorbed each detail, mentally slotting them into place. The signs of struggle inside, Toni's abandoned notebook, the shadow in the corridor. Now a hurried escape in the dead of night. Someone had taken Toni, or forced her to run. "Did you see who was inside the car?" "No. I've said too much." "I've barely scratched the surface," Agatha replied, trying one last time. But he was already shaking his head vigorously. "Please, I told you what I heard. Don't ask me for more. People get angry when you talk." Before she could press further, he scurried into his shop and closed the door with a firm, unmistakable click. The blinds snapped shut as though pulled by an invisible hand. Agatha exhaled slowly. Frustration simmered beneath her ribs, but so did clarity. The man was terrified, but not of her. Of whoever was in that building last night. She looked back at the quiet structure, its windows reflecting nothing but pale daylight. Empty buildings didn't scare shopkeepers. People did. Someone had taken Toni and wanted witnesses silent. Agatha squared her shoulders. "Well," she said to herself, "that won't stop me."
Chapter 3. Toni's Last Trail. Agatha arrived back at her cottage with a heaviness that clung to her like damp fog. The familiar warmth of Carsley, its rose gardens, its tidy hedges, its comforting stillness, did little to ease the tension coiled in her chest. She locked the door behind her, set her handbag on the table, and drew out the most troubling item she had carried home, Toni's half-torn notebook. It looked wrong in her hands. Toni's notebooks were usually immaculate. Tabs, color codes, perfectly straight margins drawn with a ruler. This one was battered, the cover scraped, the edges frayed. Several pages were missing entirely, ripped out with a violence that made Agatha's jaw tighten. She placed the notebook gently on the kitchen table, made herself a strong cup of tea, and sat down with a deep breath. The room around her was familiar and warm, kettle cooling by the stove, small vase of carnations catching the afternoon light. But the moment she opened the notebook, that coziness evaporated. Toni's handwriting filled the first page, rushed and uneven, not at all her usual style. Meeting contact again Thursday. Calls themselves E.B. Says info could expose cover-up at Aurora Beauty. Claims someone is watching their office. Aurora Beauty, a company Agatha vaguely remembered. Overly polished advertisements, overpriced creams, and a recent scandal whispered about in Mercer cafes. Something about falsified results in a product trial. Agatha traced the initials with her fingertip. E.B., she murmured. Who are you? She flipped the page. More scribbles, more urgency. E.B. insists it's bigger than product testing. Something about finances. Corrupt internal group. Warned me I should look over my shoulder. Said they liked working alone because they couldn't trust anyone. Agatha felt a swell of conflicting emotion. Pride, sharp and bright. Toni had done good work, serious work, dangerous work. But fear followed quickly after. Toni, who always tried to prove herself. Toni, who wouldn't back down from a lead, even if it pushed her too close to danger. What were you doing in that building? Agatha whispered, scanning the next page. A partial sentence caught her eye, cut off mid-thought, as though written moments before someone interrupted her. Last night, E.B. said they found proof, told me not to. The rest was gone, torn away. Agatha inhaled sharply. Proof. Someone watching. A rushed note. Torn pages. A chase in the middle of the night. A dark car speeding away. She closed the notebook for a moment, grounding herself. Panic wouldn't help. She needed to think as Toni would think. Clearly, methodically, following threads rather than emotions. She reopened the notebook and flipped to the back. A folded sheet slipped out and fluttered to the table. She recognized Toni's hurried pen strokes, short arrows, question marks, fragments of thought. At the top, who benefits? Below it, product recall avoided? Investors? Internal sabotage? Then a final line, almost an afterthought. E.B. scared, very scared. Agatha pressed her palm lightly on the page, as if she could absorb the fear Toni must have felt. A girl she cared for, a girl she protected fiercely, had walked straight into the center of something dangerous, and someone had made sure she didn't walk back out. Agatha straightened in her chair. Well, Toni, she murmured, if you started this trail, I'll finish it. She closed the notebook, her decision hardening like cooled steel. If Aurora Beauty was hiding something, if E.B. was in danger, if Toni had been taken or worse because of what she discovered, then Agatha was done waiting for clues to fall into her lap. She would uncover who E.B. was, she would trace the missing pages, she would pull at every thread until the entire corporate tapestry unraveled, and she would start now. Outside, the wind shifted, rustling the hedges. Inside, Agatha stood, notebook in hand, ready to follow the trail Toni had been forced to abandon. The hunt had begun.
Agatha carried Toni's notebook into her small home office, set it beside her laptop, and pulled her chair close with a purposeful scrape across the floor. She wasn't entirely sure where to begin, but the initials E.B. gave her a starting point. She typed them into a search bar, pairing them with every company linked to Aurora Beauty. Suppliers, consultants, former employees. It produced a whirlwind of possibilities. Edward Barnes, Elise Burrow, Elliot Bishop. Too many names, too many vague connections, none of them close enough to feel right. She leaned back, rubbing her temples. The cottage felt unusually quiet, the kind of silence that drew attention to itself. Even the birds outside seemed cautious, as if sensing the weight beneath the stillness. Her phone buzzed beside her. At first she thought it was another automated email alert, but the screen showed only 2 words, blocked number. Agatha hesitated, only for half a breath, but it was enough for a prickle of unease to slip beneath her skin. She tapped accept. Agatha Raisin? The voice on the other end was calm, steady, almost bored. A man's voice, she thought, though the tone was deliberately mild, as though softened to obscure any identifying cadence. Yes, she said sharply. You're looking into things that don't concern you. Agatha straightened, her irritation rising faster than her fear. Everything concerns me when one of my people has gone missing.
a short, humorless breath, not quite a laugh, more an exhale of condescension. "You should stop digging. Toni is safer than you think, for now." Agatha's grip tightened around the phone. "What does that mean? Where is she? If you've touched—" The man cut her off smoothly. "You're asking the wrong questions." "No, I'm asking the questions you're too cowardly to answer. Who are you, and what do you want with Toni?" A faint pause followed, as though the caller were amused by her defiance. Then, "This is your one warning. Walk away." Agatha opened her mouth to demand more, but the line clicked. Silence swallowed the room. She stared at the phone for a long, simmering moment. No background noise, no accent she could isolate, no slip of emotion, just the cold, measured tone of someone convinced they held power over her. "Well," Agatha muttered, placing the phone down with deliberate firmness, "that's not going to work." She rose from her chair and paced the office, arms crossed. The call had not been a threat. It had been a mistake. Whoever the man was, he clearly underestimated her. And worse, he had implied something she couldn't ignore. Toni was alive. The caller had spoken as if Toni's situation was controlled, monitored, even managed. For now. The words flickered like a warning light in Agatha's mind. She returned to her desk and pulled her laptop close and narrowed her search. Instead of combing through every EB in Merster, she focused on those specifically tied to Aurora Beauty headquarters, executives, securities consultants, external auditors. Her pulse quickened when she stumbled across a profile. Evelyn Brooks, former financial analyst for Aurora Beauty, fired 2 months ago under vague contractual disputes. EB, Agatha whispered, and not the kind who gets fired quietly. This was something, a direction, a thread to Paul. She opened Toni's notebook again. The scribbles about finances, internal sabotage, and someone being watched all pointed to someone with insider access, and Evelyn fit that description almost too well. She checked the time. Nearly noon. She knew herself well enough to recognize when waiting was no longer an option. With a controlled breath, she reached for her phone again, not to call, but to make a booking online. A discreet visitor slot at Aurora Beauty's Merster headquarters, a routine inquiries appointment, nothing suspicious at first glance. She selected the earliest available time. As her confirmation dinged, she closed her laptop and exhaled slowly. She wasn't intimidated, not by blocked numbers, not by smug warnings, not by corporate shadows. If they wanted her to walk away, then she was marching straight through the front doors instead. And she intended to make sure every step echoed loudly enough to shake whoever thought they could scare her into silence.
Chapter 4. The Company of Secrets. Agatha parked her car outside the sleek Merster headquarters of Aurora Beauty, letting her eyes roam over the building's glass and steel facade. The morning sunlight reflected off polished windows and dazzling angles, making the structure look less like an office and more like a fortress of perfection. Every element had been designed to project calm, prosperity, and confidence. But Agatha, having spent a lifetime noticing what lay beneath surfaces, felt the subtle hum of tension immediately. Inside, the lobby was bright and immaculate, with the faint scent of antiseptic mingling with artificial floral fragrances. She approached the reception desk, where a young woman with an impeccable blazer and wide, rehearsed smile greeted her. "Good morning, ma'am. How may I help you today?" "I'm here to inquire about some records," Agatha said carefully, letting her voice carry the confidence of someone who expected to be taken seriously. "I'd like to speak with someone in research or finance." The receptionist's smile tightened, just enough to register as unnatural. "Oh, I'm afraid all our records are confidential, but I can check who is available for a general meeting." She pressed a few keys and peered at the screen. "Would you like to schedule something for later today?" Agatha nodded, masking the irritation she felt. While she waited, she observed the employees passing by, smartly dressed, each face carrying a polite neutrality, yet their eyes flickered nervously when they passed one another. Whispers stopped abruptly, and tight smiles were offered to anyone glancing their way. Even the air conditioning seemed calculated, its hum not quite enough to drown out the tense undercurrent of unease. She was led on a brief tour of the reception area and a few adjoining offices. Every person she approached with a question about a recent whistleblower rumor answered in carefully phrased vagueness. "I'm not sure I'm at liberty to discuss that. I'm afraid I can't comment. That matter doesn't concern this department." Agatha listened, noting patterns, the hesitations, the micro-pauses, the subtle exchange of glances. Everything told her they were hiding something, even if they weren't yet ready to panic. Her instincts sharpened. This polished corporate veneer was masking a series of invisible barriers. Finally, she asked to see the research labs. The receptionist hesitated for just a fraction of a second, too long, and Agatha caught the quick intake of breath, the subtle tightening of a jaw. "I'm afraid the labs are highly restricted," she said, lowering her voice. "Only authorized personnel may enter." Agatha's eyes followed a corridor that led out of sight. Through the glass walls of the nearest lab, she glimpsed technicians working methodically, their movements precise, almost rehearsed. Samples were labeled meticulously, equipment sanitized repeatedly, and yet something about the rhythm of the place was unsettling, too controlled, too sterile. Not the ordinary hum of experimentation, but a sense that every action was observed, monitored, and measured beyond professional necessity. She made a mental note of the lab numbers and security cameras positioned at strategic angles. The subtle tension and forced corporate cheer told her more than any polite answer ever could. Whoever had intimidated Toni or the whistleblower operated with care, using appearances to mask influence and control. Agatha straightened, her gaze lingering on the corridors beyond the labs. To anyone else, this would look like a routine, polished environment. To her, it was a carefully curated labyrinth where every smile and whispered instruction could hide motives darker than the spotless floors suggested. With notebook in hand and curiosity sharp as ever, she resolved to probe further. She needed answers, and she knew that in a place like this, the truth would not simply present itself.
Agatha was just reaching the exit, notebook tucked under her arm, when a faint click-click echoed across the polished lobby. She paused, tilting her head toward the source. A woman stood by the concierge desk, slender and tall, her posture rigid, her eyes scanning the lobby like a hawk assessing territory. In her hand, she twirled a silver pen with casual precision, each click ringing sharply in the quiet space. "Ms. Raisin," the woman said, voice crisp, calm, and icy. "I've been expecting you." Agatha blinked. "Excuse me?" "I am Eleanor Bryce," the woman continued smoothly, her eyes narrowing slightly. "E.B., if you prefer brevity." The pen clicked again, punctuating her introduction. "And I gather you are curious about certain recent activities regarding one of our former associates." Agatha's heart skipped. E.B., the initials Toni had scribbled in her notebook. She kept her expression neutral, though her mind raced. "You mean Toni?" she asked cautiously. Her gaze sharpened, and she tilted her head almost imperceptibly. "I know of her, but I cannot discuss her movements in detail. Confidentiality, you understand." Agatha stepped closer, her curiosity flaring into insistence. "Confidentiality? Ms. Rice, if Toni is in danger, every fragment of information counts. Please, anything you can tell me." Eleanor's lips curved into a faint, almost mocking smile. She twirled the silver pen once more, then stopped abruptly, letting it rest between her fingers like a dagger of polished steel. "Miss Raisin, Toni reached the wrong person." The words landed like a cold gust of wind. Agatha's mind spun. Wrong person? Did she mean Eleanor herself, or someone Toni had trusted unknowingly? She opened her mouth, ready to press further, but Eleanor's gaze silenced her.
There are consequences, Eleanor continued, tone clipped, measured. Actions taken without full knowledge often lead to complications, unforeseen outcomes. She paused, letting the implication settle. Toni has been careful, clever, resourceful, but not infallible. Neither are those who follow her trail. Agatha's pulse quickened. She tried to read Eleanor's expression. Was this warning, threat, or merely observation? The silver pen clicked again, deliberate, almost teasingly. "Are you going to help me?" Agatha asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Eleanor shook her head slowly. "That is not my choice. Consider this a courtesy. Proceed cautiously. You will find what you seek, eventually. But remember, there are always observers, and not all of them are patient." Agatha's jaw tightened. The woman's presence radiated control, intellect, and subtle menace. She was sharp, perceptive, and entirely unreadable, an adversary and a guide wrapped into one. With that, Eleanor Bryce turned gracefully and walked away, her silver pen clicking with every step, until the sound faded into the muted hum of the lobby. Agatha exhaled, fingers tightening around her notebook. Rattled, frustrated, yet resolutely determined, she muttered under her breath, "Well, if E.B. wants me cautious, then I'll be careful, and I'll find Toni anyway." The encounter had shifted the game. What was once a simple search had become a strategic pursuit, and Agatha Raisin was already planning her next move.
Chapter 5. A Dangerous Reply. Back in the quiet of her cottage office, Agatha set her notebook down with a thud, heart still racing from the encounter with Eleanor Bryce. She booted up her laptop and stared at the screen, its glow illuminating the determined set of her jaw. Toni's last trail wasn't just physical, it was digital, threaded through emails, drafts, and messages that might still reveal the steps leading her into danger. Agatha clicked through Toni's inbox, scrolling methodically, noting timestamps and recipients. Most were routine work messages or mundane personal notes. Then she paused at a folder labeled Encrypted. Her pulse quickened. Only important or sensitive content ended up here. Opening it, she found a recent draft Toni had sent to an unknown recipient, forwarded at the last minute to a whistleblower Toni had been corresponding with. Agatha read, eyes narrowing. Toni's words were confident, almost daring. "If you have proof, meet me tonight. I'm not afraid." A chill swept over her. The courage Toni displayed in that single line, brave, resolute, naively fearless, suddenly felt fragile and dangerously misplaced. Whoever had been monitoring Toni, whoever had shadowed her steps, could have intercepted this. That message alone might have been the spark that placed her squarely in harm's way. Agatha leaned back, running her hand over her face. The digital trail was a roadmap, and every detail in Toni's communication hinted at her last decisions, the choices that had led to the darkened office, the abandoned notebook, and the hurried escape. She scrolled further and discovered a pattern. Toni had used a personal device rather than the company network, likely to avoid detection, but the messages were unprotected long enough for someone skilled to notice. She didn't just stumble into trouble, she led it right to herself, Agatha murmured. The cottage felt heavier with the knowledge. Each draft, each carefully encrypted line, told the story of Toni's thought process, suspicion, strategy, and overconfidence. She traced the message header and metadata, noting that the final send time was late at night, the same night her frantic texts had arrived. The alignment was too precise to ignore. Agatha's stomach churned. Toni's bravery, her instinct to confront wrongdoing head-on, had left her exposed, the weight of responsibility pressed down. Agatha wasn't just trying to locate Toni anymore. She was trying to undo the dangerous trajectory set in motion by that single defiant line. She leaned closer to the screen, scanning for anything else the whistleblower might have replied. There was a reply. Short, measured, cryptic. Stay safe. Timing matters. Don't underestimate who is watching. Agatha exhaled slowly, a mixture of fear and determination flooding her.
The warning confirmed what she had suspected. Toni's confidence had been ill-placed. The evidence she had forwarded, intended to expose wrongdoing, had drawn the attention of someone capable and potentially ruthless. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Mapping Toni's movements and digital interactions was no longer a passive exercise. Each click, each opened email, each timestamp was a clue leading to the moment Toni had unknowingly stepped into the path of danger. Agatha shut her eyes for a heartbeat. The cottage was quiet around her, yet every sound seemed amplified. The soft hum of the fridge, the ticking of the wall clock. She thought of Toni, brave and daring, unaware of the shadows closing in. Then she opened her eyes with renewed resolve. There was no time to hesitate. Understanding the message Toni had sent was just the beginning. Every fragment of that digital trail needed to be followed, every lead investigated, and every potential threat anticipated. Agatha lifted her chin. She would track Toni, uncover the truth, and face whoever put her friend in danger. The message Toni shouldn't have sent had set the trap, but Agatha Raisin intended to dismantle it.
Agatha had just finished organizing the scattered notes from Toni's emails when a knock at the door made her startle. Not a gentle tap, but deliberate, measured, an intrusion that suggested authority. She set her notebook aside and opened the door to find Eleanor Bryce standing there, the silver pen gleaming faintly in her hand as if it had been polished for this exact moment. "Miss Raisin," Eleanor said smoothly, voice low but commanding, "we need to talk." Agatha swallowed a spike of unease. "You're early," she said cautiously, stepping aside to allow the visitor in. "I wasn't expecting—" "Expectations rarely matter," Eleanor interrupted, walking past her into the cozy living room with the confidence of someone accustomed to being in control. She surveyed the room with sharp, assessing eyes before settling into the chair across from Agatha. The silver pen tapped lightly on the armrest. Click, click, click. Each sound deliberate, echoing in the quiet cottage. Agatha set her hands on her lap, steadying her voice. "What brings you here, Miss Rice?" Eleanor's gaze met hers directly, unwavering. "A warning," she said simply, "and nothing more." Agatha tilted her head. "A warning? About what?" "The reply Toni sent. It should never have been sent. That message is what placed her in immediate danger." She paused, letting the implication hang in the air. "Toni answered someone she shouldn't have. That is why she disappeared." Agatha's stomach clenched. "And that someone? Who are we talking about?" Eleanor shook her head ever so slightly. "Not the company. Far from it. The individual Toni contacted is more dangerous than you can imagine, and far more capable of hiding in plain sight." Agatha's mind raced. The company seemed like the epicenter of trouble, yet Eleanor implied there was a deeper, shadowy force at play. She leaned forward. "So you're telling me the whistleblower isn't the enemy?" Eleanor's lips curved into a faint, unreadable line. "I'm saying the situation is more complicated than it appears. One wrong move can have severe consequences. You should remember that." She tapped the silver pen against her chin. "You may feel compelled to act, Miss Raisin, but caution must guide every decision. Curiosity is admirable, bravery commendable, but recklessness can be fatal." Agatha studied her, trying to discern motive. Was Eleanor trying to protect Toni or manipulate her? "Are you helping me or warning me to stay out of it?" Eleanor's gaze sharpened. "That is entirely up to you. My purpose here is solely to clarify. Toni's actions triggered the danger. Everything else, actions, consequences, now rests with you." The pen clicked again, softly, deliberately. Eleanor rose with the same poised authority she had carried when first entering. Without another word, she walked to the door and paused, glancing back once. "Proceed wisely, Miss Raisin. You may find yourself questioning allies and enemies alike." Then she was gone. The door closed with a muted thud, leaving the cottage silent except for the faint echo of the silver pen in Agatha's mind. Agatha sank into the nearest chair, notebook on her lap. Her thoughts twisted and turned. Eleanor had revealed only fragments. half-truths, warnings, hints of dangers far beyond Aurora beauty. Ally, enemy, protector, manipulator. All Agatha knew for certain was that Toni's disappearance was more dangerous than she had imagined, and that every move she made from this moment would count.
Chapter 6. Into the Whistleblower's World. Agatha drove through the outskirts of Meerster, her eyes scanning the gray, weathered buildings along the industrial strip. Toni's scrawled notes hinted at a location tucked behind the city's forgotten warehouses, a storage facility that had long been abandoned, yet marked carefully on a map that Agatha now clutched in her hands. Every turn along cracked asphalt felt like stepping deeper into unknown territory, where each shadow could hide a clue or a threat. The facility loomed ahead, a hulking structure of corrugated metal and graffiti-stained walls. Broken windows gaped like blind eyes. It looked deserted, neglected, and entirely unremarkable, a perfect place to vanish. Agatha parked a short distance away and approached on foot, careful to keep to the edges of the lot. She felt the familiar prickle of anticipation that always accompanied a trail Toni had left. It meant she was close to the truth. Inside, the building smelled of dust, mold, and lingering dampness. Sunlight seeped through gaps in the walls, illuminating motes of floating debris that danced in the shafts of light. Agatha's eyes swept over the room, cataloging details. Crates were stacked haphazardly, and a faded tarp covered what looked like old office furniture. Then she noticed signs of recent activity: a worn blanket on a makeshift bed, a few scattered canned goods, and a clipboard with papers clipped neatly on top. Someone had been living here, hiding, working, maybe even watching. Her pulse quickened. Maps were pinned to a wall in deliberate clusters. Agatha stepped closer, noting scribbled connections between Aurora beauty locations, names, and dates. Photographs of employees, some labeled with cryptic annotations, were taped alongside the maps. Each piece suggested someone, likely Toni's mysterious whistleblower, had been piecing together a dangerous puzzle. Agatha crouched to examine documents strewn across a crate. Reports detailing test results, internal memos, and receipts tied the beauty company to activities that seemed well beyond standard corporate malfeasance. The experiments weren't merely unethical. They hinted at illegal human trials, careful concealment, and manipulation of data to cover tracks. A sharp click froze her in place. Her eyes darted to the corner of the room. A small camera, mounted on a shelf, had just pivoted. Its lens glinted in the faint light. Someone was watching. Agatha's heartbeat thudded in her ears, but she forced herself to remain calm. She had come prepared. Pulling her phone from her pocket, she took careful photographs of every document, map, and photograph, careful not to step into the direct line of sight of the hidden lens. Every angle mattered. Every captured detail could be crucial. She moved slowly, methodically, her mind piecing together the connections between the documents, the maps, and the small digital trail Toni had left behind. Whoever had been hiding here was meticulous, cautious, and brilliant. A true fugitive in plain sight. Finally, satisfied with the record she had captured, Agatha retreated toward the door, her senses heightened, every shadow now a potential threat. She kept to the edges, careful not to disturb anything further, and slipped outside into the cool afternoon air. The facility stood silent behind her, as though it had swallowed its secrets once again. Agatha paused for a moment, notebook and phone secure in her bag. The images she had captured would guide her next steps. Whoever Toni had been communicating with, the whistleblower, was clever, resourceful, and dangerous. And now, Agatha Raisin was determined to follow every thread, uncover every connection, and find her friend before the shadows closed in.
Agatha exited the storage facility with her bag securely over her shoulder, heart still thudding from the hidden camera she had spotted. The air outside felt heavier somehow, charged with the invisible tension of unseen watchers. She had just taken a cautious step onto the cracked pavement when a sudden movement caught her eye. A man emerging from the shadowed alley across the lot. He was disheveled, his coat stained and too large for his thin frame. His eyes darted left and right, sharp and wary, landing on Agatha with a flicker of recognition. "You," he hissed, rushing toward her with urgent steps. You're looking for her, aren't you?"
Agatha straightened, keeping her voice calm but firm. "Yes, Toni. I need to know where she is. Can you help me?" The man swallowed hard, glancing over his shoulder as if someone or something was closing in. "I know where she is," he whispered, leaning closer. "But I can't say, unless you promise she'll be protected. No harm, no tricks. Can you promise that?" Agatha's chest tightened. "I can," she said quickly. "I swear. I just need to know where she is. Please." For a heartbeat, the man hesitated. Then his head jerked sharply, eyes widening in alarm. "There!" he shouted, pointing over her shoulder. Agatha spun, but too late. From the corner of her vision, she caught a glimpse of another figure, moving swiftly behind her, blending into the shadows of the alleyway. The disheveled man's fear spiked instantly. "No, I can't!" Before she could react, he bolted. His long stride swallowed the distance between him and the alley's maze-like network of narrow paths. Agatha lunged, trying to catch him, but the uneven pavement and the twisting corridors slowed her pursuit. "Wait!" she called, quickening her pace. "I just need to help Toni." The man darted behind a corner and vanished, swallowed by Meerster's labyrinth of brick and shadow. Agatha slowed, panting, scanning each alleyway in frustration. Footsteps echoed faintly somewhere deeper in the network, but no matter which direction she turned, the figure had disappeared entirely. She leaned against the nearest wall, breathing heavily, eyes still scanning. Whoever the man had been, his fear was palpable. He knew something dangerous, and the urgency of his escape confirmed it. Toni's investigation had clearly touched nerves strong enough to warrant immediate flight. Her pulse steadied, as determination settled over her like armor. Whoever the man had been, and whatever secrets he held, Agatha Raisin was not about to let Toni's trail vanish into the shadows. The chase might be perilous, the leads dangerous, but she would follow them wherever they led. Somewhere in the alleys of Meerster, a crucial piece of the puzzle had just slipped through her fingers, and she would find it again.
Chapter 7. Closing in. Agatha sat at her kitchen table, the scattered documents and photographs spread around her like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, maps marked with circles and arrows, notes in Toni's hurried handwriting, and the man's cryptic warnings, all combined into a picture that only now began to take shape. She traced the lines connecting Aurora Beauty's distribution centers, suppliers, and obscure warehouse locations. At first glance, it looked like a standard supply chain, but the patterns were too precise, too deliberate. Then it clicked. Smuggling. The company's shipments weren't just moving beauty products. They were a cover for something far more sinister. Her pulse quickened as the realization settled in. Toni hadn't merely uncovered corporate misconduct. She had stumbled onto an illegal operation, hidden in plain sight. Her eyes lingered on one particular mark on the map, a rural barn tucked just outside the village, indicated repeatedly with notes like "Watch closely" and "High priority." Every lead Toni had followed seemed to converge there. Agatha's intuition told her that this could be where Toni had been taken, or at least where the operation's secrets were being stored. The thought tightened her chest. She knew she couldn't delay. The clues had been left deliberately, as if Toni had hoped someone would piece them together, but that person couldn't be hesitant. Agatha pulled on her cardigan, checked the weather, and gathered essentials: notebook, phone, small flashlight, and her keys. Every item had a place, every preparation a purpose. Outside, the village was calm. Deceptively so. Birds chirped lazily, children's laughter drifted faintly from a distant yard, and the morning mist clung to the hedgerows. Yet for Agatha, the serenity felt tense, almost mocking. The barn, isolated and rural, promised danger, but it also offered hope, a chance to find Toni and unravel the trail before the culprits could act again. She paused at the edge of her driveway, notebook in hand, and studied the route to the barn. Narrow lanes wound through fields, bordered by thick hedgerows that could conceal both her approach and the eyes of anyone watching. Agatha's mind raced through every scenario: confrontation, escape, negotiation. Her heart thumped, but a steady determination took over. Fear was natural, but hesitation could be fatal. Agatha took a deep breath, letting the crisp morning air fill her lungs. She reminded herself that Toni was brave, resourceful, and clever, qualities she shared, if in a slightly different measure. Following Toni's trail meant thinking like her, anticipating the dangers ahead, and trusting her own instincts. Finally, she tightened her grip on the notebook, swung her bag over her shoulder, and stepped toward her car. Each footstep felt heavier with the weight of responsibility and the gravity of what lay ahead. The village might appear peaceful, but Agatha knew that beyond the fields and hedgerows, the barn waited. Secrets, danger, and Toni herself were all there. As she slid into the driver's seat, she whispered to herself, a mixture of resolute and reassurance, "Hold tight, Toni. I'm coming." The engine started, and the journey toward the barn began. Every turn of the wheel carried her closer to answers, and deeper into the heart of a mystery that demanded courage, cunning, and a willingness to face the unknown.
Agatha drove down the winding country lanes, the sky darkening above with rolling storm clouds. The air was thick with moisture, and the wind rustled through the hedgerows like whispered warnings. She tightened her grip on the steering wheel, scanning the edges of the road as if the fields themselves might conceal unseen eyes. Every mile brought her closer to the barn Toni had marked on her notes, closer to the answers she desperately sought. The barn came into view, weathered and wooden, its roof creaking under the first gusts of wind. Agatha parked a safe distance away, her pulse quickening. The building was isolated, standing alone against the horizon, and every shadow seemed alive. She approached cautiously, flashlight in hand, stepping lightly across the wet grass. The barn door groaned as she pushed it open. Inside, the space was dim, illuminated only by the slivers of stormlight filtering through cracks in the wood. Signs of recent occupancy immediately drew her attention: a tattered blanket on a makeshift bed, several water bottles lined neatly against the wall, and, most striking, Toni's scarf draped over a chair. Agatha's stomach clenched. The tangible presence of her friend made the danger feel immediate, urgent. A noise from the shadows made her whip around. A figure emerged, hunched, hesitant, familiar. The disheveled man from the alley. His eyes were wide, guilt and fear etched into every line of his face. "Ms. Raisin," he began, voice trembling, I'm sorry I ran before. I didn't mean to abandon you. I didn't know who was watching." Agatha studied him, cautious but recognizing the sincerity in his demeanor. "Why are you here?" she demanded softly, keeping her flashlight trained on him. "I want to help," he admitted, taking a careful step forward. "I know where Toni is, or at least why she was taken. She trusted me. She trusted me because I told her I could help, and I didn't realize the danger she would face. That reply, her message, it was because of me. I let her into it, unintentionally." Agatha's heart ached at his words, the weight of the whistleblower's fear and guilt pressing on the barn's cramped space. She softened slightly, but remained vigilant. "We need to find her," she said firmly. "Every moment counts." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I left clues she hoped someone would follow. She's still alive, but only barely. The people who want her, they're careful, patient, and they monitor everything. I can take you to the final piece, the location where they hold her, but you have to promise me we move quickly." Agatha exhaled, her pulse steadying. For the first time, she had a path forward, a connection to Toni, and a chance to undo the danger unintentionally caused by this frightened man.
She tightened her grip on her notebook, flashlight, and instincts alike. Outside, the storm began to break, rain lashing against the barn's walls and the surrounding fields. Agatha's mind was focused, her resolve sharp. The barn had offered proof, confession, and guidance. Now it was time to follow the trail to Toni, to confront the unseen danger, and to reclaim her friend from the shadows.
Chapter 8. Toni's Escape. The disheveled man led Agatha around the barn, stepping cautiously across uneven floorboards and through the shadows cast by the storm outside. Rain hissed against the tin roof, and the wind moaned through gaps in the walls. But inside, the barn was suffused with tense silence. Agatha followed closely, notebook clutched, flashlight sweeping every corner for potential dangers. At the rear of the barn, hidden beneath a stack of hay bales, he gestured toward a worn wooden trap door. "Down here," he whispered. "This is where they kept her. But be careful. It's tricky." Agatha knelt, inspecting the door. It was locked, simple but secure. She ran her fingers along the edges, her mind already scanning possibilities. Then her eyes caught a slight irregularity in the boards lining the wall beside the door. One plank protruded subtly. With a careful push, it shifted, revealing a small cavity behind which a key rested, tarnished but intact. "Got it," she murmured, retrieving the key. The man nodded, relief flickering across his tense features. Agatha inserted the key into the lock, turned it slowly, and the latch clicked open. The cellar door creaked as she lifted it, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Agatha switched on her flashlight, illuminating the stone walls and wooden steps. At the bottom, the air was cooler, tinged with the musty scent of damp earth and straw. There, in a small corner of the cellar, huddled against a rough wooden crate, was Toni. Her hair was damp and disheveled, her clothes wrinkled and worn, but she was alive. Her eyes widened as she saw Agatha descend, relief flooding her exhausted features. "Agatha," Toni breathed, voice faint but undecidedly warm. I didn't know if anyone would find me in time." Agatha rushed forward, kneeling beside her. "I've got you. You're safe now," she said, wrapping a protective arm around Toni's shoulders. Her heart pounded with relief and lingering fear. "What happened?" Toni exhaled shakily. They captured me because of the whistleblower information. I was careless. I replied to the wrong person, and suddenly I was their target. But they panicked, thought someone would come for me, expected police, maybe journalists. They left before things got worse. I don't know why they abandoned the place, but..." She trailed off, exhausted, leaning into Agatha's support. Agatha offered her a blanket, draping it gently over Toni's shoulders. "It doesn't matter now. You're here. That's what counts." She studied her friend's face, tired, pale, but alive. Relief washed over her in a slow, powerful tide. Toni managed a weak smile. "I knew someone would follow the trail. I hoped it would be you." Agatha shook her head, trying to suppress a smile through tears and exhaustion. "Of course it would be me. I promised, didn't I?" She glanced at the man who lingered nervously by the stairs. "And thanks to him, we found you." Together, they carefully made their way back up the narrow steps. The storm continued outside, but inside the barn, the tension had eased. Agatha's mind raced with the implications of what they had uncovered, but for now, the immediate danger had passed.
Back in the cozy familiarity of Carsley, Agatha and Toni sat at the kitchen table, the teapot steaming gently between them. Outside, the village basked in the soft glow of late afternoon sunlight, the storm finally spent. Agatha poured tea into delicate cups, the ritual itself offering a sense of normalcy after the adrenaline and fear of the past hours. Toni sipped quietly, her eyes thoughtful. "You know," she began, her voice low but steady, "that reply I sent, I thought it was reckless, but I had a reason for it, a detail hidden in plain sight, one I didn't even realize you might miss." Agatha frowned slightly, curiosity piqued despite her relief. "I went through every message, every email. What did I miss?" Toni smiled faintly.
though exhaustion lingered in the curve of her lips. A coded phrase, buried in the text, subtle enough to look like ordinary words. Only someone paying attention to the patterns would notice it. It was meant to identify the real whistleblower, someone they couldn't touch or mislead. I wanted to protect them, and it seems your instincts helped complete the puzzle. Agatha's eyes widened as she connected the dots. So that's why your trail, the scattered notes, the misdirections, they weren't just mistakes, they were deliberate signals. She shook her head, a mixture of admiration and exasperation. You've always been clever, Toni. I shouldn't have underestimated you. Toni chuckled softly, the sound warm and familiar. And I shouldn't have replied so boldly without thinking of the consequences. Lesson learned. But at least we know now that the authorities can track the shadowy figures behind the operation. They'll catch the culprits responsible for the illegal experiments and the threats. My reply may have been dangerous, but it also did exactly what it was supposed to do. Agatha reached across the table, giving Toni's hand a gentle squeeze. Next time, we'll work together from the start. No more lone adventures that end with frantic chases in alleyways and secret cellars. Toni laughed, the sound lighter than it had been in days. Agreed, and I'll think twice about sending a cryptic message at odd hours. But let's be honest, if there's a next time, I won't be able to resist a little intrigue. Outside, the village returned to its usual rhythms, the distant bark of a dog, the rustle of leaves in a gentle breeze, the quiet hum of Carsley life. Inside, teacups clinked softly, and the two friends shared a comfortable silence. For now, the storm had passed, the danger resolved, and the warmth of trust and camaraderie returned. Agatha allowed herself a small smile. Despite the tension, the chase, and the unexpected twists, there was satisfaction in seeing justice restored, in knowing Toni was safe, and feeling the bond between them strengthened. Somewhere, the coded phrase had set events into motion that would bring the shadowy figures to account. Here, in the calm of the cottage, the world felt orderly again, for now. But as Agatha sipped her tea and watched Toni relax, she knew that mysteries, big or small, were never far from Carsley, and that when the next one arrived, they would face it together.